everyone! The girl says she can fix my engine. Go on, pick it up.
Sullivan threw her wrench to the floor.
Like a dog fetching a bone.
The crowd roared. Felicity picked it up, quietly.
I'm not your joke.
Hargrove's grin widened.
Fix a $30 million jet engine just for fun.
He winked at the crowd. Someone whispered,
"Oh, God. She'll destroy this thing."
Somebody film this
phones
beast.
out. Laughter. No one stepped forward.
60 seconds. Fail. And your kind is off my base forever.
Felicity placed her hand on the engine, said nothing. 60 seconds later, the laughter died. The entire base erupted in applause. 72 hours earlier. Edwards Air Force Base sat in the middle of California's Mojave Desert like a furnace with a flag on top. 108 degrees by noon. Heat shimmer turned the runway into liquid. The air smelled like jet fuel and sun-baked concrete. This was one of the most important military testing facilities in the United States. Billions of dollars in aircraft lined up in precise rows across the tarmac. F-16 Fighting Falcons with their canopies gleaming, cargo transports, experimental prototypes under tarps that no civilian would ever see. The whine of auxiliary power units never stopped. The ground crew moved in shifts around the clock. And somewhere between all of that metal and money, tucked inside a sweltering maintenance shed near the back fence, Felicity Moore sorted wrenches into a toolbox. She was 24 years old. She held a Federal Aviation Administration airframe and power plant certificate, the gold standard for aircraft mechanics. She'd finished top of her class at Baltimore City Community College. She could rebuild a turbofan blindfolded, but her badge said GS5, Junior Maintenance Technician, the lowest rung on the ladder. Her actual job? Inventory tracking, tool crib management, paperwork. She counted socket wrenches for a living while fighter jets roared overhead. 14 months she'd been here. 14 months of watching other people, people who knew less, touch the machines she dreamed about. She'd applied for transfer to the propulsion diagnostic team 3 times. 3 times denied. The reason on the form was always the same. Position requires minimum G S9 classification. The handwriting always belonged to the same woman, Elaine Prescott, Caldwell Aerospace's HR liaison. Caldwell Aerospace Systems held the base's $250 million maintenance contract. They employed 600 people at Edwards: engineers, welders, electricians, logistics coordinators, and one black girl who sorted tools. Nobody read Felicity's file. Nobody asked what she could do. They saw the workforce development label, disadvantaged youth pipeline, and put her in a closet near the tool crib with a clipboard. That was the box they built for her. She was supposed to stay in it. The problem started 11 weeks before Felicity's world turned upside down. Hangar Bay 12. A single F110GE129 turbofan engine, the beating heart of an F-16 Fighting Falcon, seized during a full afterburner ground test. The compressor stalled. The turbine locked. $30 million of military hardware went silent in 4 seconds. The jet belonged to Captain Allison Webb's squadron. Webb was a combat pilot with 3 deployments. She hadn't flown in 11 weeks. Instead, she sat at a desk filling out reports, staring through the window at a runway she couldn't use. Garrett Sullivan, Caldwell's lead project engineer and General Hargrove's golden boy, took charge of the investigation. He was 38, white, confident, and convinced he already knew the answer before he started looking. His team of 8 engineers spent 11 weeks and $1.2 million running diagnostics. They replaced the high-pressure turbine blades. They recalibrated the full authority digital engine control. They swapped out fuel nozzles. Nothing worked. Every fix followed the same pattern. Start the engine. Watch the gauges climb. At 85% N2 speed, right when the turbine should be hitting its stride, The compressor would stall. Every single time. Sullivan's conclusion. The engine needed a full high-pressure turbine module replacement. Cost, $4.8 million. Timeline, 12 weeks minimum. The problem with that? The Air Force's annual operational readiness inspection was 15 days away. If the squadron failed, Caldwell would lose the contract. 600 jobs would vanish overnight. That's why General Hargrove was there. Brigadier General Nolan Hargrove, 56, career military. The Pentagon sent him to fix the situation. Instead, he made everything worse. Felicity knew what was wrong with the engine. She'd known for 3 weeks. It started in the break room on a Tuesday afternoon. She was eating lunch alone. She always ate alone. When Sullivan's engineers sat down 2 tables away. They were loud, frustrated, arguing about exhaust gas temperatures and turbine inlet pressures. Felicity listened. She didn't mean to, but the words pulled her in the way music pulls in a musician. They were looking in the wrong place. She could hear it in their logic. They were focused on the hot section, the turbine, the combustor, the exhaust, downstream. But the stall was happening at 85% N2. That wasn't a turbine problem. That was a compressor problem. Upstream. Felicity set down her sandwich. She walked over to their table. "Excuse me, have you checked the variable stator vane actuator linkage? If the bushing is worn, the vanes can't hold angle under thermal load. That would cause airflow separation right around 85%. 8 engineers stared at her. Sullivan didn't even turn around. Did the clipboard girl just try to diagnose a $30 million engine? The table exploded with laughter. One engineer mimicked her voice in a high pitch. "Have you checked the variable stator vane?" He batted his eyelashes. The whole table howled. Another one leaned back in his chair and looked at her like she was dirt on his shoe. "Sweetheart, go count your wrenches. Leave the thinking to the grown-ups." A third one didn't even bother looking up. Who hired this girl? Seriously, was it a charity thing? Sullivan finally turned. He looked her up and down, slowly. The kind of look that made a person feel naked. "I don't know who let you in here, but this is an engineering discussion. You understand that word? N-G-nearing." He said it syllable by syllable, like she was a child learning to speak. "Now go back to your little closet and let the real professionals handle this." Felicity left. Tray untouched. That night, she filed a formal transfer request, attached her A&P certificate, attached a 2-page technical analysis of the compressor stall, handwritten with diagrams. She submitted everything to Elaine Prescott's office. 24 hours later, the request came back, stamped in red ink. Denied. Prescott hadn't even opened the technical attachment. The staple was still sealed. But that wasn't the worst part. 3 days later, Felicity stayed after hours to help Staff Sergeant Darnell Watts with a routine borescope inspection on a different engine. Watts was one of the few people on base who treated her like a human being. He was 32, black, a crew chief who'd seen Felicity work and knew exactly what she could do. They were deep inside the inspection when General Hargrove walked through on an unannounced tour. He stopped, stared at Felicity, then at Watts. "Sergeant, why is the tool girl touching my aircraft?" Watts straightened up. "Sir, Technician Moore is assisting with the borescope inspection. She's A&P certified." "I don't care if she's got a PhD from MIT. Hargrove cut him off without blinking. "She's maintenance support. She doesn't touch aircraft. She doesn't enter hangars after hours. And she sure as hell doesn't get to play pretend just because you feel sorry for her." He looked at Watts with disgust. "And you, stop babysitting. It's embarrassing." He turned to Felicity. His voice dropped low and cold. "You, out, now, before I call security and have you escorted off this base like the trespasser you are." Felicity packed up the borescope kit, carefully, methodically. She didn't rush. She wouldn't give him that. Hargrove watched her with his arms folded. As she passed him, he said it loud enough for every airman in the corridor to hear. "Next time I find you anywhere near one of my planes, I'll have your badge pulled and your name blacklisted from every military installation in the country. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Louder. Yes, sir. An airman in the corridor smirked as she walked past. He muttered just loud enough for her to catch it. Clipboard Queen thinks she's a mechanic. She kept walking. She walked out into the desert night alone. 102 degrees, even after dark. The stars above Edwards were brilliant and endless. She didn't look up. There was nothing up there for her. Back in her quarters, a converted storage room with a cot, a metal desk, and a photograph of her grandfather taped to the wall, Felicity opened his engine journal. She flipped to the page where she'd sketched the F110's compressor section from memory. Her annotations were precise. Her circles were clean. Every measurement calculated twice. She already had the answer. A worn bronze bushing in the variable stator vane actuator linkage. A simple $12 part. She'd written it all down 3 weeks ago. But she had no access, no authority, no voice. She closed the journal, pressed her palms flat against her eyes until she saw white, breathed. Then Darnell knocked. He stood in the doorway holding his phone. A printed email glowed on the screen. Colonel Theodore Brennan, arriving Thursday for an independent technical review. Pentagon sent him. Felicity froze. Brennan? Retired, civilian advisor now. 14 patents in turbofan propulsion. Darnell paused. He served with your grandfather, 3rd Marine Air Wing, Da Nang, 1969. Felicity stared at the name on the screen. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time. Hope. Somewhere in a Pentagon office, a man who once shared a foxhole with Terrence Moore was boarding a plane to Edwards. He didn't know Felicity existed. He didn't know about the clipboard or the closet or the mop they kept throwing at her feet. He didn't know about the $12 bushing that could save a $30 million engine. But in 72 hours, he would know all of it. And nothing at Edwards would ever be the same. If you think you know what happens when Colonel Brennan walks through that hangar door, you're wrong. Because what Felicity does next doesn't just fix an engine. It rips open a system that has been crushing people like her for years. Stay right here. To understand what Felicity did next, you need to understand where she came from. East Baltimore, Biddle Street, a 2-car garage with a leaking roof and a hand-painted sign that read, Moore's Engine Works. No website, no advertising, just word of mouth and a reputation that stretched across 3 zip codes. That garage belonged to Terrence Moore. Grandpa T. He was a former Marine Corps helicopter mechanic who served 2 tours in Vietnam. He could strip a Huey turbine in the dark with nothing but his fingers and a flashlight held between his teeth. The Marines gave him a commendation. The country gave him nothing. When he came home in 1971, not a single shop in Baltimore would hire a black mechanic. Not one. He walked into 14 different garages. 14 times he heard the same thing. We're not hiring right now. But they were always hiring. Just not him. So he built his own. The garage on Biddle Street fixed everything. Lawnmowers, boat engines, diesel trucks. Once, he repaired a neighbor's dialysis machine pump because she couldn't afford a technician. He charged her nothing. Felicity was 8 years old the first time Grandpa T put a wrench in her hand. She didn't know what a torque specification was. She didn't know the difference between a crankshaft and a camshaft. But she knew the way the wrench felt. Heavy, warm, important. He started her on small engines, push mowers, weed trimmers. Then he moved her to cars. By 10, she could change a timing belt. By 12, she could rebuild a small block Chevy 350 from a box of parts on the floor. By 16, she was diagnosing turbocharger failures by sound alone. Eyes closed, head tilted, listening. That was his method. He didn't teach from manuals. He taught from feel. Close your eyes, baby girl. He said it every single time. The engine will tell you what's wrong. You just gotta listen. He would blindfold her and scatter engine parts across the workbench. She had to reassemble them by touch. No peeking. Feel the weight. Feel the threading. Feel where it belongs. The garage smelled like WD-40 and old leather. A paint-spattered boombox in the corner played Motown from morning until dark. Marvin Gaye, The Temptations, Stevie Wonder. The music never stopped, and neither did the lessons. Grandpa T didn't believe in shortcuts. He believed in foundations. Don't start at the problem, he told her. Start at the beginning. An engine breathes front to back, so you diagnose front to back. Always start upstream. Always. That single principle, start upstream, was the reason Felicity could see what Sullivan's entire team had missed. They jumped to the turbine because that's where the damage showed up. Felicity started at the compressor because that's where the air comes in. Grandpa T's rule. Simple. Unbreakable. He died when she was 19. Lung cancer. Decades of breathing solvent fumes and metal dust in a garage with no ventilation because he couldn't afford to install one. The country that sent him to war couldn't be bothered to give him health care until it was too late. He left Felicity two things: his wrench, the one Hargrove kicked across the hangar floor, and his journal, a leather-bound notebook filled with hand-drawn engine diagrams, torque specifications, and notes from 40 years of fixing what others threw away. On the inside of the front cover, in blue ink that had faded but never disappeared, he had written 7 words. An engine doesn't care what you look like. It only cares if you're right. That was the motto, not a slogan. It was the foundation she built her entire life on. When Sullivan laughed at her, those words kept her standing. When Prescott stamped "denied" without reading a single page, those words kept her filing again. When Hargrove told her she didn't belong, those words kept her coming back. The engine doesn't care. It doesn't care about your skin color or your badge number or your GS classification. It doesn't care whether anyone in the room respects you. It only cares about one thing. Are you right? After Grandpa T died, Felicity nearly quit everything. She was working 2 jobs. No parents in the picture. Mother incarcerated, father unknown. She was 19 years old and completely alone. A community college advisor pushed her into the airframe and power plant certification program. She resisted at first. Then she walked into the lab and saw a turbofan engine cut in half on a display stand. She touched the compressor blades, cold metal under her fingertips, and she heard Grandpa T's voice in her head, clear as Motown on a Sunday morning. "Close your eyes, baby girl. Listen." She finished top of her class. The federal pipeline placed her at Edwards. She arrived thinking she'd finally get to work on real engines. She arrived thinking the world had changed since Grandpa T walked into those 14 garages. It hadn't. Colonel Theodore Brennan stepped off a C-40 transport on a Thursday morning and squinted into the Mojave sun. Silver hair, leather briefcase, quiet authority that didn't need a uniform to announce itself. He was 68 years old. Retired Air Force, 14 patents in turbofan blade geometry. When the Pentagon's Rapid Capabilities Office needed someone to deliver a hard truth, they sent Brennan. General Hargrove met him on the tarmac with a handshake that lasted 1 second. The two men had history. Brennan had once blocked a procurement deal Hargrove championed. Hargrove never forgot. Brennan never cared. "Colonel, welcome to Edwards." "General, show me the engine." No small talk. No coffee. Brennan walked straight to the briefing room where Sullivan had prepared a 40-slide presentation. Charts, graphs, thermal imaging data, exhaust gas temperature trends plotted across 11 weeks of failed diagnostics. Sullivan presented with confidence. His posture was perfect. His voice was steady. His conclusion was clear. The high-pressure turbine module was compromised beyond field repair. Full replacement required. $4.8 million. 12 weeks minimum. Brennan listened without interrupting. He sat with his arms folded and his reading glasses low on his nose. When Sullivan finished, Brennan asked one question. "Has anyone examined the variable stator vane assembly?" Sullivan almost smiled. "Colonel, the VSV is a mechanical linkage system. This is a thermodynamic failure. The data clearly points to the hot section." "The data points to where the damage ends up," Brennan said, "not where it starts." Sullivan blinked. Sir, my team has spent 11 weeks. I read your reports. Brennan opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of maintenance logs he'd requested the night before. He flipped through them slowly. Then he stopped. His finger landed on a borescope inspection report dated 3 weeks earlier. The handwriting was meticulous. The annotations were detailed beyond anything else in the stack. Hand-drawn diagrams of the compressor section with precise measurements and circled areas of concern. He checked the author line at the bottom. F. Moore, GS5. Brennan removed his glasses. Who is F. Moore? Sullivan glanced at the name and snorted. Nobody. She's a tool crib technician, inventory girl. She's not even supposed to be doing inspections. Honestly, I don't know how that report got into the system. She probably snuck in after hours. This inspection is more thorough than anything your team produced in 11 weeks. Brennan set the report on the table and tapped it twice. She identified 3 areas of concern in the compressor section that none of your engineers even looked at. The room went quiet. Sullivan's jaw tightened. Colonel, she's a GS5. She has no engineering credentials. She has no authority to... She has an FAA airframe and power plant certificate. It's listed right here on the base personnel roster. Brennan held up a second document, which means she's more qualified to inspect this engine than half the people in this room. Sullivan's face reddened. He opened his mouth to respond, but Hargrove cut in first. Colonel, with all due respect, the girl is maintenance support staff. She sorts wrenches. She doesn't diagnose aircraft. I've personally had to remove her from restricted areas twice because she doesn't understand boundaries. Brennan looked at Hargrove for a long moment. Then he closed his briefcase. I want to speak with her, formally, on the hangar floor, with the engine open. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. You want to bring a clipboard technician into a formal diagnostic review, in front of my people? I want to hear what she has to say about that engine. Her notes suggest she's already identified something your entire team missed. The room held its breath. Sullivan stared at the floor. Hargrove stared at Brennan. Then Hargrove smiled. It was the kind of smile that had nothing to do with happiness. It was calculation. He saw an opportunity, not to find the truth, but to prove a point. If he let the girl embarrass herself in front of the entire base, it would humiliate Brennan for backing her. 2 birds, 1 stone. Fine. Hargrove leaned back. Let's give the girl her shot. Bay 12, tomorrow morning, 0800. Full audience. Brennan nodded. And if she identifies the fault correctly, I want her reassigned to the diagnostic team. Immediate GS9 reclassification at minimum. Hargrove countered without hesitation. And if she can't, she's off my base by noon. Badge pulled. Permanently. Agreed. They shook on it. Sullivan watched from the corner of the room with his arms crossed and something dark behind his eyes. He wasn't worried about the engine. He was worried about being shown up by a girl who sorted his wrenches. Word spread across Edwards like wildfire. By that evening, every technician, engineer, and crew chief on base knew what was happening in Bay 12 at 0800. The clipboard girl was getting a shot. The general was betting against her. The legendary Colonel Brennan was betting on her. Nobody slept well that night. At 07:45 the next morning, Bay 12 was already packed. Engineers lined the walls with coffee cups and crossed arms. Crew chiefs stood on toolboxes for a better view. Sullivan's team occupied the front row with their faces set like stone. Captain Allison Webb stood near the back, watching quietly. She hadn't flown in 11 weeks because of this engine. She didn't care who fixed it. She just wanted it fixed. General Hargrove arrived in his full-dress uniform. He positioned himself front and center. This was his stage, his show. He'd already written the ending in his head. Then Felicity walked in. Coveralls, steel-toed boots, no slides, no laptop, no presentation. Just her grandfather's wrench in her back pocket and his journal in her cargo leg pocket. The whispers started immediately. That's her? The tool girl? This is going to be painful. Someone in the back laughed out loud. A technician nudged his buddy and pointed. $10 she cries before the first 5 minutes. Another one pulled out his phone and started recording. This is going on the group chat. Felicity heard all of it, every word. She kept walking. Brennan was waiting by the engine. He extended his hand. Felicity took it. His grip was firm and warm. Your grandfather was Terrence Moore, 3rd Marine Air Wing, Da Nang. Yes, sir. He was the best mechanic I ever served with. He could hear a rotor imbalance from 200 yards. He taught me everything. Brennan held her hand 1 second longer. Then he let go and stepped back. Show me. It was the first time anyone at Edwards Air Force Base had ever looked at Felicity Moore and seen something other than a label. Not the tool girl, not the clipboard queen, not the charity hire. A mechanic, a real one, with a lineage. Hargrove grabbed his radio. This was the moment from the hook, the moment everything changed. Everyone, stop. This black girl says she can fix my engine. Phones came out. The dare was set. The clock was ticking. Felicity looked at the engine. 40 years of her grandfather's knowledge hummed in her fingertips. She placed her hand flat on the cowling. Cold metal. Familiar. And she began. The first thing Felicity did surprised everyone. She didn't open a panel. She didn't reach for a tool. She asked for the engine to be started. Ground idle, she said. No afterburner, just idle. Sullivan laughed from the front row. She doesn't even know where to start. She wants to listen to it like it's a car engine in a junkyard. The engineer next to him shook his head. This is what happens when you let unqualified people near aircraft. Hargrove crossed his arms and leaned toward the officer beside him. This'll be over in 2 minutes, maybe less. The auxiliary power unit spooled up. Compressed air shot through the starter valve. The F110 turbofan caught and roared to life. Bay 12 filled with noise, a deep, rolling thunder that vibrated the floor and pressed against every chest in the room. Felicity closed her eyes. She placed her bare palm flat against the engine nacelle. Not on the cowling, not on the access panel, directly on the metal skin, where the vibration traveled clearest. She's touching it with her bare hand, someone muttered. Is she praying? More laughter. Phones, still recording. Felicity didn't move. 5 seconds. 10. 15. She stood still with her eyes closed and her fingers spread across the nacelle like a doctor pressing a stethoscope to a chest. Then she spoke, eyes still closed. Increase to 70% N2. The engine operator looked at Brennan. Brennan nodded. The throttle pushed forward. The turbine whine climbed higher. The noise shifted from a rumble to a scream. Felicity tilted her head, just slightly, like a musician catching a wrong note in an orchestra. There, her eyes opened. Can you hear that? A 3 per rev harmonic at the 9th compressor stage, 38 hertz. It's not in the hot section. It's upstream. Dead silence from the engineers. Sullivan stepped forward. Instrument says otherwise. He pointed to the vibration analyzer screen mounted on the test stand. Green across all bands. No anomaly. There's nothing there. Felicity didn't argue. She walked to the analyzer and pointed to the settings panel. Your low-pass filter is set at 50 hertz. The harmonic is at 38. You're filtering it out before it ever reaches the display. Sullivan stared at her. That's the default setting. Default doesn't mean correct. Brennan spoke from behind. Adjust the filter. The technician operating the analyzer hesitated. He looked at Sullivan. Sullivan said nothing. The technician lowered the filter threshold to 20 hertz. The screen changed. A sharp spike appeared at exactly 38 hertz, right where Felicity said it would be. Pulsing, steady, unmistakable. The engineer who had mocked her 2 minutes ago put his coffee down slowly. He didn't pick it up again. The room went quiet. Not awkward quiet. Shocked quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when 200 people realize they're watching something they've never seen before. A girl with no title and no rank had just found something that $1 million diagnostic program missed, using nothing but the palm of her hand. Brennan wrote something in his notepad. Sullivan uncrossed his arms for the first time all morning. His fingers were trembling, not from cold. Hargrove said nothing, but his jaw tightened so hard you could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. Felicity didn't pause to let the moment land. She was already moving to the second phase. She asked for the borescope. A crew chief handed it to her. She fed the fiber optic cable into the 9th stage compressor access port, a location Sullivan's team had never inspected. Not once in 11 weeks, because they assumed the fault was downstream, in the turbine, in the hot section, where the damage always shows up. But Felicity didn't start where the damage showed up. She started where the air comes in. Start upstream, always. The borescope image appeared on the wall-mounted monitor. 200 people stared at a high-definition view of the compressor stator vanes. To most eyes, they looked perfectly normal, clean, intact, no cracks, no erosion. Sullivan crossed his arms again. "Looks fine to me." He turned to his team. "Anyone see anything?" They shook their heads. One of them smirked. "She's fishing." Felicity ignored them. She pointed to the trailing edge of stator vane number 6. "See this? The variable stator vane actuator arm has 0.8 millimeters of play. Specification maximum is 0.2. The linkage bushing is worn." She zoomed the borescope closer. The image sharpened. And there it was, a tiny wobble in the actuator arm. Invisible at room temperature. Invisible in a static inspection. But under thermal load, when the engine heated up to operating temperature, that 0.8 millimeters of play would expand to over 1.5. The vane would flutter. Airflow would detach from the blade surface, and the compressor would stall. When the engine reaches 85% N2, the thermal expansion increases the clearance beyond tolerance, Felicity said. The vanes can't maintain their angle. Airflow separates. The compressor stalls every single time. She pulled the journal from her cargo pocket, opened it to a page near the back. A hand-drawn diagram of the exact same compressor section, annotated, measured, circled. She held it up next to the borescope monitor. They matched, perfectly. She'd drawn this 3 weeks ago. In her room. Alone. While Sullivan's team was spending another $100,000 looking in the wrong place. Captain Webb took 2 steps forward from the back of the room. Her eyes were locked on the monitor. She wasn't crossing her arms anymore. Sullivan's lead engineer pulled out his phone and quietly photographed the borescope image. He knew what he was looking at. He knew they'd missed it. Sullivan himself stared at the monitor without blinking. His face was the color of ash. 11 weeks, $1.2 million, 8 engineers, and a girl with a wrench and a dead man's notebook had just made all of it look like a waste of time. Because it was. Hargrove still hadn't moved. His arms were still crossed, but his fingers were gripping his own sleeves now. Tight. Brennan wrote a second note in his pad. He didn't look up. Felicity was already moving to Phase 3. "I need a 10mm socket, cotter pin pliers, and a VSV actuator bushing kit." She rattled off the part number from memory. GE 1102-0889. Darnell Watt stepped forward from the side of the hangar. He was holding the kit. He'd pulled it from stores the night before. He knew this moment was coming because he'd watched Felicity prepare for it every night for 3 weeks. He handed her the kit without a word. She nodded once. Then she went to work. Her hands moved with a precision that made people stop breathing. She disconnected the worn actuator linkage, removed the degraded bushing, a bronze cylinder no bigger than a thimble. She held it up so the borescope camera could capture it. The wear pattern was visible to everyone on the monitor. Smooth on one side, grooved on the other. Metal that had been slowly grinding itself to death for months. She pressed the new bushing into place, reassembled the linkage, torqued it to specification, 28 inch-pounds. Safety wired it with 3 precise loops. Inspected her own work once, then twice. Each movement was deliberate. Each step was textbook. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, no checking a manual. Her fingers moved the way a pianist's fingers move across keys, from memory, from muscle, from 10,000 hours of practice in a garage that smelled like WD-40 and played Motown until the sun went down. She'd done this 1,000 times on Biddle Street. The engine was bigger, the stakes were higher, but the hands were the same. 12 minutes. That was all it took. She stepped back from the engine, wiped her hands on her coveralls, looked at the engine operator. Run it again. Full military power. The operator looked at Brennan. Brennan nodded. The engine spooled up. 70% N2. Smooth. The 38 Hz spike was gone from the analyzer. Clean green line. 85%. The speed where the engine had stalled every single time for 11 weeks. The turbine held. No stall. No hesitation. 90%. 95. Turbine inlet temperature nominal. Exhaust gas temperature within limits. Vibration analysis clean across every single band. The F110 GE129 turbofan. $30 million of military hardware that had defeated 8 engineers for 11 weeks at a cost of $1.2 million was running perfectly. The sound was beautiful. A clean, unbroken roar that filled Bay 12 like a cathedral organ. No flutter, no hesitation, no ghost frequency hiding beneath the noise. Just pure, healthy thrust pouring out of an engine that 20 minutes ago every expert in the room had declared unfixable without a $5 million overhaul and 3 months of downtime. Fixed by a $12 bronze bushing and 12 minutes of work from a girl they called the Clipboard Queen. The first person to react was Captain Allison Webb. She started clapping. Alone. The sharp crack of her palms echoed through Bay 12 like a gunshot. Then Darnell joined her. Then a crew chief near the back. Then another. Then 10. Then 50. Then 100. Within seconds, every person in Bay 12 was on their feet, clapping, cheering, whistling. Some of them the same people who had laughed 5 minutes ago. Some of them the same people who had whispered, "Tool Girl," and "Clipboard Queen," and filmed her like she was a circus act. The technician who bet $10 she would cry stuffed his phone in his pocket. The engineer who called it a charity hire couldn't look anyone in the eye. Now they were all standing, every single one, because they had just watched something that doesn't happen in textbooks, something that doesn't come from a 40-slide presentation, or an 11-week diagnostic plan, or a $4.8 million budget. They had watched a girl from East Baltimore listen to an engine the way her grandfather taught her, eyes closed, hands open, and hear what no one else could hear, see what no one else could see, fix what no one else could fix. The sound of 200 people clapping filled Bay 12. Felicity stood beside the engine, wrench still in hand. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She didn't say a word. She just breathed. The applause faded. But the engine was still running. Brennan held up a hand. The room fell silent. He turned to the engine operator. Full acceptance test profile. Idle through afterburner. Zone 1 through 5. I want every parameter on the record. The operator nodded. His hands moved across the throttle controls with purpose now. Not caution. Purpose. The throttle advanced. The turbine climbed past military power and into afterburner territory. Zone 1 ignited with a low boom that rattled the hangar doors. Zone 2, 3, 4. Each stage louder, hotter, more violent than the last. Zone 5. The afterburner lit with a concussive force that Felicity felt in her sternum. 130 decibels of raw thrust slammed through Bay 12. The exhaust plume stretched 30 feet behind the test stand. Heat distortion bent the desert landscape into something liquid. Coffee cups danced off tables and shattered on concrete. 4 minutes and 22 seconds. That's how long the full acceptance test lasted. Every parameter held. Turbine inlet temperature, nominal. Exhaust gas temperature, within limits. Oil pressure, Stable. Vibration analysis across all frequency bands. Clean. The digital recorder captured it all. 4 minutes of flawless operation from an engine that hadn't run past 85% in 11 weeks. The operator pulled the throttle back to idle, then to cutoff. The turbine spooled down. The roar collapsed into a whine, then a whisper, then silence. Total silence. Brennan walked to the data printout. The thermal printer had been spitting paper for 4 straight minutes. He tore off the sheet, held it up, and studied it with his reading glasses balanced on the tip of his nose. His face gave nothing away. 20 seconds passed. 30. Then he removed his glasses, folded them slowly, and said it, loud enough for every person in the hangar to hear. That is the cleanest acceptance run I have seen on an F110 in 15 years of advisory work. He set the printout down on the nearest workbench, placed his glasses on top of it, and turned to General Hargrove. The entire hangar turned with him. Hargrove stood where he had stood for the last 30 minutes, arms at his sides now, not crossed. His jaw was locked. His uniform was still perfect. His posture was still straight. But something behind his eyes had changed. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something he hadn't felt in a very long time. The unfamiliar weight of being completely and publicly wrong. Brennan walked toward him, unhurried. He stopped 3 feet away and spoke in a voice that was quiet, but carried through the silence like a bell. General, the woman you called a tool girl just saved your ORI. She saved your contract. She saved 600 jobs. She saved the Air Force approximately $5 million. And she did it with a $12 part and 12 minutes of work. He paused. I believe you owe her something. Every eye in Bay 12 locked onto Hargrove. He looked at Felicity. She was standing by the engine with grease up to her elbows and her grandfather's wrench in her right hand. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't doing anything at all except standing there, steady and calm, the way Grandpa T had taught her to stand when the world was loud and wrong and trying to knock you down. She just met his eyes. Steady, patient, like an engine waiting at idle. Hargrove swallowed. The sound was audible in the silence. Well done. He forced the words through his teeth like broken glass. Miss Moore. It was barely louder than a whisper. But in the silence of Bay 12, with 200 witnesses and a dozen phones still recording, it was enough. It was public. It was permanent. And it was the hardest thing Nolan Hargrove had ever said in his life. The hangar erupted for the third and final time. Not just clapping now, cheering, stomping. Captain Webb let out a sharp whistle. Darnell grabbed Felicity's wrench arm and raised it above her head like a prize fighter's. Felicity gently pulled her arm back down. She pressed the wrench against her chest with both hands, closed her eyes. 3 seconds, just 3. In those 3 seconds, she wasn't in Bay 12 anymore. She was in a garage on Biddle Street. Motown on the radio, WD-40 in the air, and a voice she would never hear again saying the only words that ever mattered. Close your eyes, baby girl. The engine will tell you what's wrong. You just gotta listen. She opened her eyes, exhaled slowly, and for the first time in this entire story, Felicity Moore smiled. If you've ever been told you don't belong, in a room, a job, a dream, drop a wrench emoji in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hashtag Justice for Felicity. Hashtag Talent has no color. Brennan filed his independent assessment that evening. 12 pages, 3 recommendations, no ambiguity. First, Felicity Moore to be immediately reclassified from GS5 to GS11, Propulsion Diagnostic Specialist, effective upon Pentagon approval. Second, Caldwell Aerospace Systems to conduct a full audit of its workforce classification practices at Edwards Air Force Base, with specific attention to patterns of systemic gatekeeping against minority personnel. Third, the variable stator vane bushing inspection to be added to the F110G E129 standard troubleshooting tree for compressor stall events, submitted to General Electric as a formal field service recommendation. The Pentagon approved the first recommendation within 48 hours. No debate, no committee. A single phone call from the Rapid Capabilities Office to Caldwell's corporate headquarters in Houston. Felicity Moore's badge was reprinted on Monday morning. New title, new clearance level, new office. Not a storage closet near the tool crib, but a glass-walled workspace in the propulsion diagnostics wing with a view of the runway she used to watch from a distance. But Brennan wasn't finished. He called Felicity into his temporary office on Tuesday afternoon. He sat behind a borrowed desk with his briefcase open and a single folder in front of him. "I'm putting together a technical advisory team for the Pentagon's next-generation engine diagnostics program, F-35 propulsion systems, the most advanced fighter engine ever built in this country." He pushed the folder across the desk. "I want you on it, not as support staff, as lead diagnostician." Felicity opened the folder. GS-13 position, 6-figure salary, Arlington, Virginia, direct Pentagon access. Her name was already typed on the offer letter. Brennan had written it before the acceptance test was even finished. "I knew before you touched that engine," he said quietly. "Your grandfather's people don't guess. They know." Felicity stared at the letter. She didn't speak for a long time. "Can I have 24 hours? Brennan nodded. "Take what you need." That night, Felicity sat on her cot in the storage room that had been her home for 14 months. She opened Grandpa T's journal to the last blank page. She uncapped a pen, and she wrote 4 words in the same blue ink her grandfather had used on the front cover. "We did it, Grandpa." She accepted the next morning. Now, let's talk about what happened to the people who tried to keep Felicity Moore in a closet. Garrett Sullivan was the first to fall. Brennan's report dedicated an entire section to Sullivan's diagnostic methodology. The language was clinical. The conclusion was devastating. 11 weeks of investigation, $1.2 million expended, 8 engineers deployed, and the lead project engineer never once directed his team to inspect the cold section of the engine. This represents a fundamental and systemic failure of diagnostic protocol that calls into question both the methodology and the leadership of the diagnostic team. Caldwell Aerospace's corporate office reviewed the report within a week. Sullivan was not fired. That would have been too easy. Instead, he was removed as lead project engineer and reassigned to the Documentation and Compliance Division. His new office was a windowless room on the second floor. His new job was reviewing maintenance paperwork, filing inspection reports, and managing inventory records. Clipboard work. The exact work he had mocked Felicity for doing. The exact work he told her was more her speed. Now it was his speed. Every morning, every afternoon, every day for the foreseeable future. His replacement as lead project engineer arrived from Caldwell's Houston office 2 weeks later. Her name was Camille Torres. She was 34, Latina, and brilliant. Sullivan had dismissed her contributions during a joint project meeting the previous year. He called her analysis overly cautious. She now outranked him by 2 levels. Sullivan never said a word about it. He didn't have to. The irony said everything. General Hargrove's reckoning was quieter but deeper. Brennan's report included a separate addendum addressed directly to the Inspector General's office. It documented Hargrove's conduct during the public challenge in specific, unflinching detail. The language he used, the dare he issued, the phrase, "your kind," the threat to blacklist Felicity from every military installation in the country. All of it captured on at least 12 cell phone recordings. The Inspector General opened a formal review. Hargrove was not court-martialed, but he received a formal letter of reprimand, a permanent mark on his service record that effectively killed any chance of a 3rd star. His career had a ceiling now, and he had built it himself. 3 weeks later, Hargrove was quietly reassigned to a logistics command at a base in the Midwest. No ceremony, no crowd, no one clapping. He packed his office alone on a quiet Sunday afternoon and drove off the base before dawn on Monday. The man who once commanded the attention of 200 people in Bay 12 left Edwards without a single person noticing. Elaine Prescott was the last domino. Brennan's second recommendation, the workforce classification audit, triggered a review of Prescott's HR decisions over the previous 3 years. The findings were damning. 5 transfer requests from minority technicians denied on procedural grounds never applied to white applicants with identical qualifications. 3 formal complaints buried without investigation. A pattern so consistent it couldn't be called coincidence. Caldwell Aerospace placed Prescott on administrative leave, pending the results of a federal equal employment opportunity investigation. 6 weeks later, she was terminated. Not reassigned, not demoted. Terminated. The evidence was too clear and too documented for anything less. The system that kept Felicity Moore sorting wrenches in a closet didn't just crack. It was dismantled. Piece by piece, person by person. Not by revenge, not by anger, by the simple, unglamorous mechanism of accountability. Felicity didn't celebrate any of it. She was already in Arlington by the time Prescott's termination letter was signed. She had bigger engines to listen to. 6 months later, the Pentagon's Rapid Capabilities Office, Arlington, Virginia. Felicity Moore sits at a conference table reviewing F-35 propulsion data with senior engineers. On the table beside her laptop, Grandpa T's wrench, polished but still scarred. 3,000 miles away, a young black man from Chicago starts his first day at Edwards Air Force Base. He walks into Bay 12 with a toolbox and a dream. On the wall beside the engine stand, he finds a framed note. An engine doesn't care what you look like. It only cares if you're right. He reads it twice, picks up his wrench, gets to work. If you know someone whose talent is buried by prejudice, share this video now. Subscribe for more stories where the underestimated become undeniable. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been the smartest person in the room that nobody would listen to? #talent has no color. #justice for Felicity.